All right, so autumn blaze maple, multiple stems. Here's your branch bark ridge. So this is where the bark is pushing up like plate tectonics, like mountains on the continent. It's the spot where the tree gives up tissue because these two growing side by side. We've got branch tissue, trunk tissue, and down in this zone is where the two meet. The branch is formed with a kind of a basket weave. Trunk tissue grows, branch tissue grows on top of it. But at the branch bark ridge, there's no wood-to-wood connection through here. So you can feel the trunk collar, I call it trunk collar, right here. So typically on a tree like this, a very vertical branch bark ridge, we look at the vertical line here going toward the ground, and we'll try to mimic that angle onto the branch. And thankfully at this time of year, we can feel the trunk collar. So we want to try to avoid damaging the trunk tissue, because that's what's going to allow it to close like a donut. If I cut the trunk tissue down, a flush cut the bottom of the trunk tissue off, then it's going to close like two sliding doors, and it has a chance to where it will never fuse. It needs that pressure pushed to the center when you close like a donut to get wood to fuse across there. That's when we prevent rot. We exclude oxygen and moisture. If not, it'll always have a little bit of rot going on in there. But it's that angle. We typically take a vertical line. This angle gets mimicked onto here. Whenever we can feel the trunk collar, there's times of year where you can't because of that back and forth growth. So right now I can see that right there. If I was going to cut it off, I could actually draw a line right here. But we're not going to cut this guy off. So I would take the chainsaw and I'd make this cut. But come here and see it. See, we've got trunk tissue here. This is really kind of a codominant, but you can feel right here. Feel the live tissue here, and there's an indentation. This thing is slowed down. So you're gonna make that cut right through here.
Here, I guess is where you can show that where it doesn't close like a ring.
Exactly. We left a heel on here. Okay, this should have been more down here. The cut should have been more like this. And it has to grow up and over. This will be soft by the time this gets over to try to close, and it's going to curl in. Squirrels love it. But here on this, I drew on this one. Here's the cut line I would make with the saw, right here. Because you can actually feel the trunk tissue here, and there's a little indentation where this guy is attached, and this thing is dying, so it's really slowed down, and that's the cut line I would make. So up here we've got that donut. That was a proper cut. So we cut branch tissue, we didn't cut into the trunk tissue. So we've got it closing like a perfect donut. And with that pressure from all four sides, it closes right tight, and it can push the bark out of the way, and it can fuse wood across that surface. Tars and paints and anything people want to sell you at the hardware store to help this heal, trees don't heal, they seal. The best thing to do is keep it dry and smooth and create a flat surface so it can close across there as fast as possible. Here's an example where it tore a little bit. Now the wound wood had to make a detour, and that's going to be a handicap for that closing like a donut. So a lot of these will end up with a little seam down the center, and they're going to ooze a little sap periodically, and they're never going to close completely, so we're going to rot behind there. Any branch that you take off exposes the tree you see at that moment to rot. And the fungi can wick moisture throughout the tree to facilitate that rot. So here, this is dead. See the bark coming off? So I would take a couple of these guys off. See how the trunk is growing around here?
Hold on now. So
that's trunk tissue. I'd make the cut right here.
I know. That's what I was just going to ask that. So here's where typically you're...
Great. So it's a turtleneck. The trunk wood is trying to grow out and close this. This hasn't fallen off, so you are literally making this cut. You're just taking the dead wood, and it's never completely uniform, so you're technically going to leave a slight stub because I don't want you to cut into this trunk tissue at all, okay? Make the best cut you can, but you got to look around because it comes a little higher on this side. Make the best cut you can without cutting trunk tissue. Here, look at this one's a beauty on this side. See how the trunk tissue is growing out? This is your cut. The trunk turtleneck of trunk tissue has come out around this branch, so we're going to cut out here. That's the proper cut for the tree. Now, in Milwaukee, we had residents that would call us saying, you left stubs. No, we left trunk tissue and didn't damage the tree. but it's misinterpreted at times. So this one's already lost some pieces, so it looks like it's a little suppressed. So you can feel, once again, there's the trunk collar here. So to me, your cut line is like right about here, okay? In all of our cuts, there's really only 3 cuts we make: a branch cut, codominant stem, and a subordination cut, that reduction cut. That's the science of pruning, okay? In all 3 of those scenarios, you never cross the branch bark ridge. This is the dividing line. You always stay on. So with a chainsaw, the tough part is training people to make an uppercut and have it end properly. It takes a lot of skill. The utility line clearance folks are really good with their equipment because they're around high voltage. So they're very good with their equipment, but making that uppercut, here's where you do your 3-step cut. I would cut here, here, and snap this off so I don't tear bark. Then you make your final cut. But this, with a handsaw, you'll be able to make that cut, get up in here and go down. With the chainsaw, very often you're coming up. So that's one where you don't want to botch that in front of somebody's front window. Okay, but that would be your cut line. Now on this one in particular, as you go, you might take that because it looks out of place. The interior ones in the main structure are more blended in. That looks out of place. So once again, the art of pruning. So to me, where I don't want to chase sprouts and create 100 more. This one here is out of place. When they're looking out their window, this looks out of place. I would take these if they're on the interior of this canopy. And once again, this is based on the property owner's preference. We're going to be back at this property next summer to go through it with the property owner. But if you clean these out at this age, you can invite 3 to 4 times more sprouts from everything you cut. So we got to be careful on that. But here's one I would definitely take. So with pruning, there's 3 cuts we make: branch removal, codominant stem removal, that's that V crotch, and then a reduction cut to slow a branch down, where we take the length of the branch away and direct it away from something or just slow it down. The art of pruning is how to make that tree look beautiful, okay? And our goal is always to take a minimum of live tissue, always be looking for dead tissue, broken, diseased, that kind of thing. But the art of pruning is shaping that tree within its genetics, so the phenotype that's expressed, to make it look appropriate. But like we just talked about on this property, sometimes chasing sprouts inside a over mature crabapple can create a cluster of sprouts coming back that is very unattractive. So managing that tree, knowing the species, knowing the growth habits is a big thing to the art of pruning. What is it? So we got lichens. So this is algae and fungus living together. A lot of times you see them on rocks. When a tree is growing really, really slow, lichens are not being sloughed off by the bark being sloughed off as it grows rapidly. So this thing almost looks like an old rock. What is it?
Lilac. Yeah.
Is it?
Right here you can see.
Wow. Okay, so we got a very deep planted Japanese tree lilac. Look at this. Yeah, so we got a lot of problems here. On this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say we're not going to touch it. This is a conversation with the property owner next summer because we're doing a walkthrough. I don't even want to start on this thing. It's not a hazard. No one's going to get injured from this thing, but this is one that we are going to kind of evaluate the trees as we go today, give them a brief summary of what we saw today, but then that pushes us to next summer live tissue examination once we leaf out. But this is one we're going to recommend for removal and replacement. And we will come up with a vision for planting here by the time we're done today. On the spruces, it's not the classic branch bark ridge scenario. They almost look like a pencil stuck in styrofoam, okay? So you can see the cut you're making. It's like almost like a flush cut. But once again, only cutting branch tissue. Now Shigo says people want to leave a little bit of a stub so they make sure they don't cut trunk tissue. He said, we don't leave stubs, we're professionals. We're not butchers, okay? And actually he said we can't say butcher because butchers are a highly skilled trade, okay? But the bottom line is we don't leave stubs, we don't cut the trunk tissue, so we just do it perfect. We're professionals, okay? But on this guy, when you guys walk up to this and you're gonna make these cuts, a lot of companies will use a chainsaw. What I can't stand is when the chainsaw hits the bark above and below. It looks horrible, it's unacceptable, so I'd rather be in here with a handsaw. Or I like these short sections of pole saw are really nice on spruce because you don't have to go in, especially when they're branched to the ground. You can reach from 6 feet away and do what you got to do. But make certain we don't have live tissue on these guys. Any branch that has live tissue on it, don't go cleaning it up. Okay. So deep planted, we got a dead area on the base of this tree, and the sugar's piling up above. So we're still putting on a lot of wood above there, but obviously we got a lot of issues here. This thing needed stewardship pruning a million years ago, but it's also planted too deep. So this is one that next summer on our walkthrough we'll recommend removal and replacement. Obviously pretty critical for the house for shade for the backyard and things. So we're going to want to get something back in here that'll put on some growth fast. With that piece, because they're here doing stuff, I'd be more inclined to just get rid of it and probably go in with like an autumn blaze or a Sienna Glen. Probably Sienna Glen in this spot. Give them a little something different. Very twiggy. Yeah, I would just be sucker plucking a little bit. Just clean up, we called it whisker pruning in Milwaukee. I think this is Ammermachii. And Diana had shared that this is obviously a very focal point tree.
What's the scientific name on it?
Machia amarensis.
Yes, yep.
Almost looks like
And we got sapsucker damage. So sapsucker is not chasing grubs as a woodpecker. It's actually tapping into the sap. It's in the phloem in the inner bark.
Is that what these streamers are there to prevent cracking?
I think that was part of the rationale was to frighten the sapsuckers to keep them away. I don't know if it's effective, but obviously we've got big included bark. Okay. Not a bad root flare on this guy, and probably actual root flare. Because if this would have been deep planted, I don't think it would have survived this long with that smooth. It's not. But very pronounced root flare. This stem is probably getting choked off by the other tree, and more included bark here. So obviously these are a species that you really got to be diligent in your chasing the codominant stems early. But anything else you see on this one, I mean, I don't want to touch anything. Even these little stubs I would rather leave because they're hanging stuff.
I think it looks fine.
Yeah. So I would be kind of hands off on this guy. Let me just walk around the other side. See the rocks? See the stone? Yeah. I call them red oak, but this one looks more red than anything. But we got black, northern pin, and red all together, and it's hard to distinguish. I just call them red oak.
Oh, like
just in general. So here's your bur oak, and they hybridize a lot. So here's that looks to me like a true bur oak twig. This is the bark is for prairie fires. It's insulation so they can survive a prairie fire. A prairie fire lasts about 45 seconds. They have to survive that whoosh coming through. This is where I talk about suppressed oaks though. When they're suppressed in the understory, they don't do anything. They will exist, but they won't become that. See this shear line? To me, this is wind, where it's sheared through the pith. So it slides on itself briefly. Trees are built in all these compartments in all these different ways so that they can flex. And rather than uproot and die or snap off and die, they'd rather shear like that and come right back and keep producing acorns and reproducing. So that, but look at how perfectly centered it is. So that's frost cracking and sun scald. Our strongest winds typically are west-northwest. Well, then we show a crack on the northeast side, they call it frost cracking. We show a crack on the southwest side, they call it sun scald, but it isn't all through the canopy at that age bark, okay? But when we have like the northwest winds, well that shear line will be here and it will open up, but it wasn't frost or sun that did it. Here's one that I wouldn't try to correct. This stub, you see how the turtleneck's trying to grow around it? But there's no lever here to try to pop it out. If you cut in there, there's a zero-sum game because you're going to end up damaging the trunk on either side. I'd rather have this there. Fortunately, the red oak is not surrounded by other red oaks. So from an oak wilt standpoint, a loner like this is much better off. But look at that, the other crack there. Think of the wind this takes up on this hilltop.
Yeah.
And what they do, they opened up the hilltop to build the house. So this tree that grew in a group, but here's that shear line with that wind going this way. But look at it. All right, so in here, I really don't see anything we have to cut in here. Once again, if you're trying to bill and trying to make it look like you did something, I think that a lot of property owners appreciate you not touching something if you don't have to. That's the professional side of it, not I got to show that I'm billing you and I had to do something. But I like this little cluster. So this is the oak savanna. That's southwest Wisconsin toward Madison from here, the old oak savanna, the driftless area. And the oak savanna means it's trees, grassland with scattered trees. And oaks like full sun, okay? Versus our regular forested situation. So oaks self-prune very well. The more ragged they look, the more I say it's a northern pin or a black oak, because they don't self-prune as well as a red does.
They're more of a forest species.
Absolutely. But that's why we clear cut. You can select cut oak for only so long, then you have to clear cut to get them to sprout off the stumps, but they have to come up together because they have to have full sun. You can't grow oak under oak. So people that don't like clear cutting don't understand, then you won't have oak. All right, there we've got one. See that included bark? Mm-hmm. But there again, it's too far along. Now, if that's a feature tree by the patio, I would say we bolt it and put a cable in, because I don't want to take that off.
You think that's too far along?
I do. That's an old tree.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of life left in it.
Right, but I say you will have rot if you take that off. That'll never close if you cut that off now.
And is that partially because there's not the branch bark ridge?
Right, it's going to close like two sliding doors if it even closes.
Right. You can't make a good cut on it. So
Cannot.
right.
If I was going to, see that lowest branch coming off it?
Aren't white oaks really good at compartmentalizing?
They're exceptional at compartmentalizing.
So
but
is that one that you would that play in the factor of maybe reasoning with that? You know, maybe do take it or no?
nope. Because of its age.
Okay.
That's an old tree.
Okay.
Another cherry. These cherries are actually pretty remarkable. Look at that root flare and look at the surface roots. So here's a good example of when I would do the walk around. If she loves her oaks, then mulch this whole island.
Right.
Make it a shade garden. And you mulch that because look at all that mower damage. Okay? But I would say you're going to mulch this whole thing. That would make,
here?
huh?
Is this an oak?
Cherry. No.
No.
What is it?
Yeah, it is.
Cherry.
It doesn't look like it's doing great.
No, it's not.
Cherry. Cherry? Cherry.
It's not black cherry though. Is that just a really big pin?
You know?
Pin cherry.
Oh, pinch. Oh, you got one here that's probably similar to it.
Yeah. That looked to me more straight black cherry because it's got the platy bark all the way up.
Good donut.
Yeah, that looks good. Yep. All right, so this morning we did a walkthrough prior to doing some touch-up pruning. The goal here, these trees are what they are. So my mantra in this situation like this is less is more. Okay, we're focused on deadwood removal, broken, diseased, damaged branches, a little bit of clearance. In particular, we're seeing trees that have stub cuts where there have been some clearance issues. So we're going to do that. We're going to plan on being back in the future, but we don't want to do too much today, and we want to minimize live tissue removal. Thank you.